Marie Laveau is a name that evokes mystery, power, and fear, but few truly understand the life behind the legend. Born into slavery in early 19th century Mississippi, she rose to become one of the most influential women in American history, a figure whose influence stretched far beyond the confines of the enslaved community. Known to some as the Voodoo Queen of New Orleans, Marie Laveau's life was a complex tapestry of resilience, intellect, spiritual authority, and survival in a society that systematically sought to erase her. Yet despite her immense impact on culture, religion, and social justice, her story remains largely absent from American classrooms. The history books fail to tell how a former slave navigated the dangerous intersections of race, gender, and power to protect her people, challenge the status quo, and leave a legacy that continues to shape Louisiana and beyond. This is not just the story of a mystic. It is the story of a woman whose brilliance, courage, and defiance defied the limitations imposed upon her by a society built on oppression. Marie Laveau's life forces us to confront what history chooses to remember, and what it deliberately forgets. Marie Laveau was born into a world defined by oppression, hierarchy, and systemic injustice. In New Orleans, Louisiana, around the year her birth took place during a period when slavery was firmly entrenched in American society, particularly in the South, where the economy relied heavily on forced labor for the production of sugar, cotton, and other cash crops. Being born into slavery meant that Marie's very existence was defined by limitations imposed upon her not by her own abilities but by the color of her skin and the circumstances into which she was born. Her early life would have been shaped by the rigid structures of the plantation system and the social rules that governed enslaved people, including restrictions on movement, education, and personal autonomy. Yet even in these conditions, the seeds of her extraordinary life were quietly being planted. She was the daughter of a free woman of color, which in itself was a rare position that carried its own complexity. This connection would provide Marie with a unique perspective on freedom, social mobility, and survival in a society built on racial hierarchy. Her family environment was a blend of African traditions and the cultural influences of New Orleans, which was a melting pot of French, Spanish, African, and Caribbean cultures at the time. This rich cultural backdrop would later influence her spiritual practices, healing methods, and her mastery of voodoo, which combined African religious traditions with elements of Catholicism and Native American rituals. From a young age, Marie would have been exposed to the dual realities of life in New Orleans: the harsh, oppressive conditions imposed by slavery, and the vibrant, resilient culture of the African and Creole communities that surrounded her. Children born into slavery often began their training and labor responsibilities early, learning household work, field labor, or specialized skills depending on the demands of the enslaver. For Marie, this environment likely provided her with a keen understanding of human behavior, survival tactics, and the social dynamics of both the enslaved community and the white elite. She would have witnessed, firsthand, the injustices inflicted upon those who were powerless, as well as the ways in which certain individuals could navigate these structures to gain influence or protection. This duality of oppression and cultural richness would shape her understanding of power, spirituality, and leadership, which became central to her later life. Marie's early experiences also exposed her to the spiritual life of her community, which often blended African religious practices with Christianity and folk healing. In enslaved communities, spiritual traditions served not only as a source of comfort, but also as a means of resistance, identity preservation, and empowerment. Marie would have observed the role of wise women, healers, and spiritual leaders in maintaining the social and emotional well-being of their communities, learning how knowledge of herbs, rituals, spiritual practices could provide both tangible and intangible forms of protection. Her exposure to these practices likely ignited her interest in healing and spirituality, planting the foundation for her eventual rise as a spiritual leader. Education for enslaved individuals was heavily restricted, with laws often forbidding the teaching of reading and writing, as literacy was considered a threat to the institution of slavery. Despite these limitations, Marie's early life likely involved informal education through observation, oral storytelling, and apprenticeship with knowledgeable elders in her community. She would have absorbed lessons on herbal medicine, spiritual rituals, and social intelligence, learning how to navigate the complex hierarchies around her. Her intellect, memory, and perceptiveness would have set her apart even in her youth, giving her tools to influence others and later establish her authority as a leader. Marie's formative years were also influenced by the unique demographic and social conditions of New Orleans, a city that was a hub of trade, cultural exchange, and diversity. Unlike many other parts of the American South, New Orleans had a significant population of free people of color, creating a more nuanced social landscape in which race, class, and freedom intersected in complex ways. This environment allowed Marie to witness examples of both social mobility and systemic oppression, offering her insights into power structures, negotiation, and strategic influence. The lessons she absorbed from observing the interactions between enslaved people, free people of color, and the white elite would later become a critical aspect of her ability to operate effectively across social boundaries. Her birth into slavery also meant that Marie's childhood was marked by constant awareness of vulnerability and limitation. Enslaved children were subject to the whims of enslavers, facing potential separation from family members, physical punishment, and the denial of basic rights. These circumstances fostered resilience, adaptability, and a deep understanding of human nature. Marie learned to read people, anticipate danger, and recognize opportunities, skills that would become essential as she navigated the complex social, spiritual, and political networks of her later life. The combination of natural intelligence, cultural exposure, and early lessons in survival set the stage for the remarkable trajectory that would define her legacy. Despite the oppressive circumstances of her birth, Marie Laveau demonstrated an early aptitude for leadership and social influence. She likely formed bonds with other children and elders in her community, learning the importance of alliances, mentorship, and mutual support. These relationships provided her with knowledge, resources, and social connections that she would later leverage to build her reputation and authority. Her ability to communicate effectively, inspire trust, and command respect would have been evident even in her youth, distinguishing her from her peers and hinting at the extraordinary influence she would one day wield. Marie's early life was also characterized by a deep connection to the natural world, as she learned to identify medicinal plants, prepare remedies, and understand the healing properties of earth. This practical knowledge, combined with her growing understanding of spiritual practices, positioned her to become a figure who could offer both physical and spiritual assistance to those around her. In a society where enslaved people had limited access to medical care and protection, Marie's skills would have been invaluable, establishing her as a trusted and respected member of her community. Her early mastery of these arts laid the groundwork for her eventual reputation as a healer, spiritual guide, and protector. The circumstances of Marie Laveau's birth in slavery also instilled in her a profound sense of empathy and justice. Having witnessed the suffering and exploitation of those around her, she developed a keen awareness of the need for protection, advocacy, and empowerment. These values became central to her later work, as she used her influence to help marginalized individuals, advocate for justice, and navigate the perilous intersections of race, gender, and class. Her birth into a world defined by limitation did not confine her spirit. Rather, it motivated her to transcend those boundaries, forging a path of leadership, influence, and enduring legacy. Her childhood experiences, the cultural richness of New Orleans, the mentorship she received, and the survival skills she developed during these early years collectively shaped the foundation of the woman she would become, a figure whose power, intelligence, and spiritual authority would challenge the very structures that sought to keep her and her community oppressed. Marie Laveau's mastery of herbal medicine, spiritual practices, and healing was not an accidental occurrence. It was the result of years of careful observation, apprenticeship, and immersion in the rich cultural traditions that surrounded her from birth. Growing up in New Orleans, a city where African, Caribbean, Native American, and European influences converged, Marie was exposed to a diversity of knowledge systems that shaped her understanding of the world. Within enslaved communities, knowledge of herbs and natural remedies was passed down through generations, often in secret, as a form of empowerment against the physical and social constraints imposed by slavery. Marie absorbed this knowledge, learning not only the properties of plants and roots, but also the rituals, prayers, and spiritual frameworks that accompanied their use. This education was holistic, combining the practical aspects of healing with a spiritual dimension that addressed both the body and the soul. Her training in herbal medicine likely began in childhood, under the guidance of elder women in her community who acted as midwives, healers, and spiritual guides. These women were repositories of knowledge, maintaining traditions that traced back to Africa and adapted to the conditions of the Americas. They taught Marie how to recognize the medicinal properties of local plants, how to prepare remedies for common ailments, and how to integrate spiritual intention into the healing process. Through these apprenticeships, she gained skills in creating poultices, teas, salves, and other treatments that could alleviate illness, ease pain, and strengthen the body. This knowledge was invaluable in a society where formal medical care was inaccessible or often dangerous for enslaved people and free people of color, providing her with a means to serve her community while establishing her reputation as a knowledgeable and trusted figure. Alongside herbal medicine, Marie learned the spiritual practices that would later define her as a leader in the Voodoo tradition. Voodoo in Louisiana was a syncretic religion, blending African spiritual systems with Catholicism, Native American beliefs, and local folk practice. It emphasized the connection between the physical and spiritual worlds, the importance of ancestral spirits, and the power of ritual to influence outcomes in everyday life. Marie's education in these practices was immersive, involving ceremonies, chants, symbolic acts, and the use of charms and talismans. She learned to read signs,
interpret dreams, and understand the unseen forces that guided human behavior and natural phenomena. This spiritual literacy was as important as her knowledge of herbs, allowing her to address the psychological, emotional and social needs of her community in ways that extended beyond physical healing. Marie's development as a healer was also shaped by the social dynamics of New Orleans. The city was home to a vibrant and diverse population, including enslaved people, free people of color, and European immigrants, all of whom navigated complex hierarchies of race, class and power. By observing these interactions, Marie developed a keen understanding of human nature, learning how to counsel, advise and mediate conflicts. She saw how knowledge of spiritual and herbal remedies could be leveraged not only for health, but also for social influence. Her ability to provide solutions to physical ailments, emotional distress, and social problems positioned her as an indispensable resource within her community, enhancing her authority and reinforcing her role as a leader. The combination of herbal expertise and spiritual knowledge allowed Marie to address the interconnected needs of her community. Illness in enslaved populations was not only a physical challenge but also a social and economic one, as sick individuals could be punished or exploited. By offering remedies and spiritual guidance, Marie mitigated these risks and protected those under her care. Her practices also served as a form of resistance, maintaining cultural continuity and empowering her community to navigate a society structured to oppress them. Through her skill and wisdom, she became a figure of protection, authority and influence, able to intervene in matters that ranged from health crises to personal disputes and spiritual concerns. Marie's approach to healing was deeply personal and intuitive. She recognized the importance of individualized care, tailoring remedies and rituals to the specific needs of each person she served. This attention to detail and understanding of human complexity distinguished her from others and contributed to her growing reputation. People from all walks of life, enslaved individuals, free people of color, and even white citizens, sought her guidance and services, drawn by her perceived power, compassion, and knowledge. Her practice transcended the limitations of her social status, allowing her to build a network of influence that extended into both marginalized and elite communities. Her work in spiritual practices also involved a sophisticated understanding of symbols, ritual timing, and the use of objects imbued with meaning. Marie employed candles, powders, charms, and symbolic gestures to create rituals that were believed to channel spiritual energy and produce tangible results. She taught and mentored others, ensuring that this knowledge was transmitted and preserved within the community. This role as teacher and guide further cemented her status as a leader, as she became not only a practitioner but also a custodian of tradition, responsible for maintaining the integrity and efficacy of her practice. Marie's growing expertise in healing and spiritual practices also intersected with the legal and social constraints of her time. In a society where enslaved and marginalized people had limited agency, her ability to influence outcomes through spiritual and medicinal means was a powerful form of empowerment. She navigated these boundaries carefully, using her knowledge to protect herself and others, while avoiding direct confrontation with authorities that could have jeopardized her safety or freedom. Her skill in balancing spiritual authority with social pragmatism was a hallmark of her intelligence and strategic thinking, qualities that would define her leadership in the decades to come. By the time she reached adulthood, Marie Laveau had established herself as a figure of extraordinary skill, knowledge, and influence. Her mastery of herbal medicine and spiritual practices was comprehensive, combining practical healing with a deep understanding of human psychology, social dynamics, and spiritual power. She had transformed the knowledge passed down to her in childhood into a sophisticated, multifaceted practice that addressed the physical, emotional, and social needs of her community. Her reputation grew as word spread of her abilities, attracting clients and followers from diverse backgrounds who sought her guidance, protection, and intervention. This period of her life laid the foundation for her rise as a central figure in New Orleans society, a woman whose expertise would allow her to wield influence, challenge societal norms, and leave a lasting impact on history. Her deep connection to the spiritual and natural worlds, combined with her intelligence, empathy, and social acumen, positioned Marie as a healer whose abilities transcended the limitations of her time. Her understanding of the intertwined nature of physical health, spiritual well-being, and social stability became the cornerstone of her enduring legacy, establishing her as a figure whose life and work would be remembered long after her death. Marie Laveau's influence among both enslaved and free Black communities in New Orleans was not merely a product of her skills in herbal medicine and spiritual practices. It was also a reflection of her remarkable ability to navigate social networks, build trust, and provide guidance in a society that systematically sought to marginalize people of African descent. From the moment she began to assert her knowledge and authority, she became a central figure within her community, someone whom people turned to for leadership, protection, and advice. Her influence was multifaceted, spanning spiritual, social, and political spheres, and it grew steadily as her reputation for wisdom, power, and empathy spread. For the enslaved population, Marie represented hope, resilience, and a form of empowerment that was otherwise denied to them by the legal and social structures of the time. In New Orleans, free people of color occupied a unique social position, often navigating the spaces between the enslaved population and the white elite. Marie, through her upbringing and experiences, understood the nuances of this position and leveraged it to build alliances and strengthen her influence. She engaged with free Black communities, providing guidance, spiritual leadership, and practical assistance. Her ability to connect with individuals from various backgrounds allowed her to bridge gaps within the community, creating networks of mutual support and protection. These networks were critical in a society where oppression and violence were constant threats, offering a form of communal resilience that bolstered the social fabric of marginalized populations. She became a figure whom individuals could rely on for counsel, protection, and intervention in matters that extended beyond the spiritual into the social and personal realm. Slavery imposed not only physical hardships but also psychological trauma, including separation from family members, brutal punishment, and the constant threat of exploitation. In this context, Marie's presence provided a sense of stability, guidance, and moral support. Her knowledge of herbal remedies and spiritual practices offered tangible relief for physical ailments, while her wisdom and counsel helped individuals navigate interpersonal conflicts, anticipate threats, and make critical decisions. Her influence was both practical and symbolic, representing a form of leadership rooted in empowerment, community cohesion, and resilience. Marie's ability to maintain her influence required not only her knowledge and skills, but also exceptional social intelligence. She understood the importance of trust, discretion, and loyalty, and she cultivated these qualities in her relationships. People confided in her, sought her guidance, and respected her judgment, because she demonstrated an unwavering commitment to their well-being. This trust allowed her to exert influence in subtle but meaningful ways, guiding community decisions, mediating disputes, and shaping the social norms of her environment. Her influence extended to organizing community rituals, ceremonies, and gatherings that reinforced cultural identity, solidarity, and shared value. Through these acts, she strengthened the bonds within the community and ensured the preservation of traditions that were threatened by the forces of oppression and assimilation. Another dimension of Marie's influence was her ability to operate effectively across social hierarchies. While she was deeply embedded within Black communities, she also cultivated relationships with white patrons, local elites, and influential figures. These interactions required strategic acumen, as she had to navigate a society that placed severe limitations on the autonomy and authority of Black women. By maintaining these connections, Marie was able to protect her community, gain access to resources, and exert subtle forms of power that extended beyond the immediate circle of her followers. Her influence, therefore, was not confined to spiritual or domestic spheres. It had a social and political dimension that allowed her to advocate for justice, intervene in legal matters, and mediate conflicts that might otherwise have escalated. Marie's leadership style combined authority with empathy, ensuring that her influence was rooted in genuine care for those she served. She listened to the concerns of her community, provided practical solutions, and offered spiritual guidance that resonated with the lived experiences of her followers. This combination of competence and compassion made her an indispensable figure, someone whose influence could not be easily challenged or ignored. People sought her out not merely because of her mystical abilities, but because she understood the complexities of their lives, and provided guidance that addressed both immediate and long-term needs. The mechanisms through which Marie exerted influence were diverse. She used her knowledge of herbs and healing to provide medical relief, her spiritual practices to address psychological and emotional challenges, and her social intelligence to mediate disputes and foster cohesion. She conducted rituals, ceremonies, and public demonstrations of her abilities that reinforced her authority and inspired confidence in her leadership. Her influence was thus reinforced by both action and perception, creating a self-sustaining cycle in which her reputation attracted more followers, which in turn amplified her capacity to guide and protect her community. Marie's role as a spiritual and community leader also intersected with her identity as a woman in a patriarchal society. While gender often limited opportunities for authority, Marie leveraged societal expectations to her advantage. By positioning herself as a healer, spiritual guide, and mediator, she occupied a role that commanded respect while allowing her to exercise significant power. Her influence challenged traditional gender norms by demonstrating that women could wield authority effectively, particularly in the spheres of community leadership, spiritual practice, and social negotiation. In this way, she not only served her immediate community but also became a model for female empowerment and leadership within marginalized populations. Her influence extended to multiple generations within the community, as she mentored younger women, passed on her knowledge of herbal remedies and spiritual practices, and fostered networks of leadership that would endure beyond her own lifetime. By cultivating successors and maintaining the continuity of traditions, Marie ensured that her impact was not fleeting but rather embedded in the social and spiritual fabric of New Orleans. Her guidance helped to sustain cultural identity, resilience and collective agency in the face of ongoing oppression, cementing her role as a foundational figure in the history of African American spiritual and social leadership. Marie's authority and influence were also reinforced by the myths and legends that grew around her. Stories of her spiritual power, ability to heal, and capacity to protect her followers spread through oral tradition and local lore, enhancing her reputation and solidifying her position as a central figure in the community. These narratives, while sometimes exaggerated, reflected the deep respect and admiration she commanded, reinforcing her social and spiritual authority. The perception of her as a figure of extraordinary power served both to inspire her followers and to deter potential adversaries, further consolidating her influence within and beyond the Black community. The combination of practical skill, spiritual mastery, social intelligence and strategic acumen made Marie Laveau an unparalleled figure in the landscape of 19th-century New Orleans. Her influence was multifaceted, affecting health, social cohesion, spiritual life and communal resilience. By understanding and addressing the interconnected needs of her community, she created a role for herself that transcended the limitations imposed by race, gender and social status. Her authority was rooted in competence, empathy, and the ability to navigate complex social structures, making her a trusted leader, whose impact extended far beyond the immediate circle of her followers. Through her engagement with both enslaved and free Black communities, Marie Laveau became a symbol of resilience, empowerment and agency. She demonstrated that influence could be wielded effectively, even under conditions of systemic oppression, and that leadership could emerge from knowledge, wisdom, and the ability to serve the needs of others. Her life illustrated the power of cultural continuity, spiritual authority and social intelligence in shaping communities and protecting marginalized populations. Marie's influence was not simply the result of her skills, it was the product of her understanding of people, her ability to inspire trust and her unwavering commitment to the well-being of her community, creating a legacy of leadership that would endure long after her time. Her growing influence set the stage for the extraordinary reach she would later achieve, allowing her to operate as a central figure in the spiritual, social and political life of New Orleans.
Marie Laveau's mastery and popularization of voodoo was one of the defining aspects of her life, cementing her reputation as a spiritual leader and giving her a level of influence that transcended social, racial, and economic boundaries. Voodoo, as practiced in Louisiana during the 19th century, was a syncretic religion that blended African spiritual traditions, Catholic rituals, and elements of Native American beliefs, forming a unique system of worship, healing, and community cohesion. For Marie, voodoo was not merely a set of rituals or magical practices, it was a comprehensive framework for understanding the world, addressing the needs of her community and exerting moral and spiritual authority. Her ability to navigate the complex spiritual, cultural, and social aspects of voodoo allowed her to create a role that was both revered and feared, positioning her as a central figure in New Orleans' cultural landscape. Marie's early exposure to African and Creole spiritual traditions, combined with her practical knowledge of herbs and healing, laid the foundation for her mastery of voodoo. She understood that spirituality was deeply intertwined with daily life, and that rituals, symbols and ceremonies could provide guidance, protection and empowerment. Voodoo offered a framework through which individuals could interpret misfortune, seek justice and maintain a sense of agency within a society that systematically disempowered them. By integrating these practices into her work, Marie became a conduit between the visible and invisible worlds, offering her community a sense of control, hope, and spiritual clarity. One of the key aspects of Marie's influence in voodoo was her ability to synthesize diverse religious elements into a cohesive and accessible practice. Louisiana voodoo incorporated Catholic saints, Christian prayers, and African deities known as Loa, or spirit. Marie skillfully navigated these syncretic elements, presenting rituals and ceremonies that were meaningful, culturally resonant, and spiritually potent. She used symbols, charms, and sacred objects in ways that reinforced belief and elicited psychological and emotional responses from her followers. This combination of tangible practice and spiritual authority allowed her to engage with people across different social and racial strata, attracting both marginalized individuals seeking guidance and members of the elite who were intrigued or impressed by her perceived power. Marie's voodoo practices were deeply intertwined with her community work, reflecting her understanding that spiritual authority was inseparable from social responsibility. She conducted ceremonies for protection, healing and guidance, often using her rituals to address practical issues affecting her community such as illness, family disputes or social injustice. Her work went beyond simple superstition. It provided structure, counsel and psychological support in a context where institutional resources were often inaccessible or discriminatory. By positioning voodoo as both a spiritual and pragmatic tool, Marie elevated its status from a marginalized or misunderstood practice to a respected and influential system of belief. The popularity of Marie Laveau's voodoo extended far beyond her immediate circle of followers. Word of her abilities spread throughout New Orleans and neighboring regions, drawing individuals from diverse backgrounds seeking her guidance, blessings, or intervention. Her reputation was enhanced by accounts of her spiritual power, her ability to communicate with spirits, and her skill in crafting charms or spells that addressed specific needs. People believed that she could influence outcomes in matters ranging from personal relationships to business ventures and legal disputes. This reputation, whether entirely factual or amplified through oral tradition, reinforced her status as the Voodoo Queen, a title that symbolized both spiritual authority and social prominence. Marie's approach to voodoo emphasized inclusivity and accessibility. She taught followers and apprentices, passing on her knowledge of rituals, ceremonies and spiritual practices to ensure continuity and community resilience. By mentoring others, she not only extended her influence but also created networks of spiritual leadership that strengthened the cohesion of her community. These networks enabled the preservation of cultural traditions, reinforced social bonds, and maintained a collective sense of identity among people navigating the oppressive structures of 19th-century New Orleans. Her role as teacher and leader ensured that voodoo was not confined to superstition or secrecy, but rather integrated into everyday life as a system of guidance, protection, and empowerment. Another critical aspect of Marie's work was her ability to navigate the tensions between voodoo and mainstream society. Voodoo was often misunderstood, feared, or demonized by white authorities and religious institutions, leading to both fascination and suspicion. Marie's intelligence, discretion, and strategic engagement allowed her to maintain her practice while mitigating potential backlash. She cultivated relationships with influential figures including politicians, business leaders, and social elites, who sought her counsel and respected her ability. These connections provided a measure of protection for her and her community, allowing her to practice and teach voodoo openly while maintaining her influence and authority. Her skill in negotiating these boundaries exemplified her strategic acumen and highlighted the intersection of spiritual leadership and social navigation in her life. Marie's rituals and ceremonies were characterized by both spectacle and profound spiritual significance. She employed music, dance, chanting, and symbolic objects to create immersive experiences that engaged participants on multiple levels emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually. These practices fostered a sense of community, reinforced belief, and strengthened the bonds between individuals and the spiritual world. Her ability to create meaningful, transformative experiences through voodoo contributed to her reputation as a powerful and effective spiritual leader, someone capable of addressing the complex needs of her followers in tangible and profound ways. The cultural impact of Marie Laveau's popularization of voodoo extended beyond her lifetime, shaping perceptions of New Orleans as a center of spiritual, mystical, and cultural richness. Her integration of African, Catholic, and indigenous elements created a distinctive religious tradition that attracted curiosity, respect, and admiration. Voodoo became not only a spiritual practice but also a vehicle for cultural preservation, community identity, and social cohesion. Through her leadership, Marie transformed what was often dismissed or stigmatized into a respected and influential system of belief, demonstrating the power of knowledge, ritual, and cultural synthesis in empowering marginalized communities. Marie's work in voodoo also intersected with issues of justice and protection. She used her spiritual authority to advocate for the vulnerable, mediate conflicts, and provide guidance in legal and social matters. Her reputation for spiritual insight and moral authority allowed her to intervene in situations where conventional channels of power were inaccessible to Black communities. By combining spiritual practice with practical intervention, she reinforced the role of voodoo as a tool for empowerment, protection, and community resilience, demonstrating that religion and spirituality could serve as instruments of both personal and collective agency. Ultimately, Marie Laveau's popularization of voodoo was inseparable from her identity as a leader, healer, and protector. Her ability to blend tradition, ritual, and strategic engagement created a practice that was spiritually potent, socially relevant, and culturally resonant. By elevating voodoo from marginalized superstition to a respected system of guidance and empowerment, she solidified her legacy as a figure of extraordinary influence,
intelligence and resilience. Her work demonstrated the capacity of spiritual practice to address multifaceted human needs, reinforce community bonds and challenge societal limitations, establishing her as a central figure in the spiritual and cultural history of New Orleans and beyond. Marie's mastery of voodoo, combined with her social acumen and dedication to her community, ensured that her influence would endure long after her lifetime, leaving a legacy that continues to inspire fascination, respect and scholarly interest in the intersections of spirituality, culture and power. Marie Laveau's use of her position to protect and support marginalized communities including enslaved people and women, was one of the most defining aspects of her life and legacy. Her influence extended far beyond her mastery of voodoo or her abilities as a healer. It encompassed a deep commitment to justice, community welfare and the protection of those whose voices were systematically silenced in 19th-century New Orleans. In a society structured to exploit and oppress Black people, women and the poor, Marie carved out a space where she could intervene, advocate and offer sanctuary, effectively becoming both a spiritual and social protector. Her efforts were not limited to symbolic acts or rituals. They included tangible actions that improved the lives of individuals and families, offering them safety, guidance and hope in an otherwise hostile world. For enslaved people, Marie's role was especially significant. Slavery imposed profound hardships, including forced labor, brutal punishment, and the constant threat of family separation. Within this context, Marie became a source of solace and empowerment. She used her knowledge of healing, spiritual practices and social networks to shield individuals from harm whenever possible. Her interventions might take the form of counseling families on strategies to avoid punishment, providing protective charms or rituals believed to ward off danger, or negotiating with influential figures on behalf of those in distress. Her presence offered enslaved people not only practical support but also a sense of agency in circumstances where personal autonomy was severely restricted. She helped them navigate the complexities of daily life under oppression, offering both spiritual guidance and practical solutions. Women, in particular, benefited from Marie's protective influence. In addition to facing the general hardships of slavery, women were subjected to gender-specific forms of violence, including sexual exploitation, forced reproduction, and limited social mobility. Marie recognized the vulnerability of women in this context and used her position to empower them. She offered counsel, mediation, and protection, ensuring that women had someone to advocate for them and to intervene when their rights and safety were threatened. Through her mentorship, she also provided younger women with skills, knowledge and spiritual tools that enhanced their independence and resilience. By nurturing their capabilities and fostering their confidence, she created a network of women who could support one another, reinforcing the social cohesion and strength of her community. Marie's protection of marginalized communities was not limited to immediate intervention. She was deeply aware of the structural inequalities that shaped daily life and worked to mitigate their effects wherever possible. This included leveraging her social influence to advocate for fair treatment in legal disputes, helping families navigate bureaucratic obstacles, and providing resources to those in need. Her interventions often combined practical assistance with spiritual guidance, reflecting her understanding that well-being encompassed both the material and the psychological or spiritual. By addressing these interconnected needs, Marie created a holistic form of protection that strengthened the resilience and cohesion of her community. Her work also involved creating a sense of empowerment and self-worth among those she helped. In a society that sought to dehumanize enslaved individuals and women, Marie's guidance affirmed their value, agency and dignity. Through her rituals, teachings and personal interventions, she reinforced the idea that individuals could influence their circumstances, maintain their cultural identity, and navigate the challenges imposed by oppression. This psychological and spiritual support was as crucial as any physical protection, fostering a sense of empowerment that enabled her community to endure and resist systemic injustice. Marie's ability to protect and support marginalized communities was enhanced by her strategic use of social networks and influence. She cultivated relationships across racial, economic and social lines, allowing her to negotiate power dynamics that could otherwise be prohibited. White elites, local politicians and influential figures often sought her counsel, fascinated by her reputed spiritual power and practical wisdom. By engaging with these individuals, Marie gained access to resources, information and leverage that she could use to protect her community. Her ability to operate effectively across these boundaries required exceptional intelligence, discretion and strategic thinking, demonstrating that her influence was rooted not only in spiritual authority but also in social acumen. Marie's interventions were often highly personalized, reflecting her deep understanding of human nature and her commitment to addressing specific needs. She assessed the circumstances of each individual or family, identified potential risks or opportunities and crafted tailored solutions that combined spiritual, practical and social elements. This individualized approach reinforced trust and loyalty among those she helped, ensuring that her influence was sustained and respected. People sought her guidance not merely out of fear or reverence but because she demonstrated a consistent commitment to their welfare and the efficacy of her interventions. Her protective work also included a dimension of justice and advocacy. Marie was known to intervene in situations where individuals faced injustice, abuse or exploitation, whether mediating disputes, advocating for fair treatment or using her influence to prevent punishment. She acted as a guardian for those who had limited recourse within formal systems of power. Her actions reflected a moral vision in which the vulnerable deserved protection, dignity and respect, and where leadership entailed responsibility for the welfare of others. In this sense, her role transcended that of a healer or spiritual leader. She became a moral and social authority whose guidance and intervention could shape outcomes in meaningful ways. Marie's work with marginalized communities was also characterized by long-term vision and sustainability. She did not simply respond to immediate crises. She sought to equip individuals and families with knowledge, skills, and spiritual tools that would enable them to navigate future challenges. By teaching herbal remedies, spiritual practices, and strategies for personal and communal resilience, she ensured that her protective influence could endure beyond her direct involvement. This focus on empowerment and capacity building reinforced the strength and cohesion of her community, creating a legacy of resilience that persisted across generations. Her approach was holistic, addressing the physical, emotional, spiritual, and social dimensions of well-being. She understood that marginalized individuals faced complex, interrelated challenges and that effective support required an integrated approach. Through her combination of healing, spiritual guidance, social advocacy and mentorship, Marie created a multifaceted system of protection that addressed the full spectrum of human need. This comprehensive approach distinguished her from others and reinforced her reputation as a leader capable of safeguarding both individuals and the broader community. The significance of Marie Laveau's work in protecting marginalized communities cannot be overstated. In a society structured to oppress and exploit, her interventions provided tangible relief, moral support, and a sense of agency. She demonstrated that leadership could be exercised in ways that empowered others, reinforced cultural identity, and fostered social cohesion. Her ability to navigate complex social networks, leverage spiritual authority, and provide practical assistance made her an indispensable figure in the lives of countless individuals. Marie's legacy as a protector and supporter of marginalized communities extended far beyond her immediate lifetime. Her methods, teachings, and example inspired others to take on leadership roles, cultivate spiritual and practical skills, and advocate for justice within their own community. By blending spiritual authority with social responsibilities, she created a model of leadership that emphasized empowerment, resilience, and moral obligation. Her life illustrated that true influence is measured not merely by personal power or reputation, but by the capacity to improve the lives of those most vulnerable, ensuring that they are seen, valued, and protected. Through her actions, Marie Laveau left an indelible mark on New Orleans and on the broader history of African American leadership and community resilience. She demonstrated that spiritual mastery, intelligence, empathy, and strategic acumen could be combined to create a powerful force for protection and empowerment, capable of resisting systemic injustice and fostering enduring social cohesion. Her work stands as a testament to the capacity of individuals to create meaningful change, even within the most constrained and oppressive environments, and underscores the profound impact that leadership rooted in care, justice, and community responsibility can have on marginalized populations. Her unwavering dedication to the welfare of enslaved people, women, and other vulnerable individuals established Marie Laveau as a figure of extraordinary moral, social, and spiritual significance, whose influence would resonate across generations and whose legacy continues to inspire scholars, practitioners, and admirers of history alike. Marie Laveau's influence extending into white society, including politicians, wealthy elites, and other influential figures, was a testament to her extraordinary intelligence, charisma, and strategic acumen. In a society rigidly divided by race, class, and gender, her ability to command respect and wield power across these boundaries was remarkable and unprecedented. While her primary loyalty and concern remained with her community, enslaved and free people of color, her engagement with white society allowed her to expand her influence, gain protection for herself and her followers, and assert a form of authority that transcended conventional limitations imposed on Black women during the night. By navigating this delicate and often dangerous terrain, Marie demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of human behavior, social hierarchies, and political opportunity, turning her spiritual and social skills into tools of empowerment and negotiation. Marie's interactions with white society were facilitated by her reputation as a voodoo priestess, healer, and spiritual guide. White elites, Intrigued by her abilities and the mystique surrounding her persona, often sought her counsel, believing in her power to influence events, protect interests, or provide insight into personal and professional challenge. Her status as a respected figure in African American communities added to her credibility, making her influence more compelling to outsiders who understood that she commanded loyalty, knowledge, and authority. These relationships were carefully cultivated and strategically leveraged, allowing Marie to secure a measure of safety for herself and those she protected, while simultaneously amplifying her social and spiritual authority. Engaging with politicians and wealthy elites required Marie to exercise extraordinary social intelligence. She needed to navigate their expectations, beliefs, and prejudices while maintaining her autonomy and protecting her community. Her ability to communicate effectively, interpret intentions, and negotiate outcomes was critical in these interactions. She was able to provide guidance and counsel in ways that impressed her clients without compromising her principles or overstepping the boundaries that could place her at risk. This balancing act required not only personal charisma, but also a deep understanding of the structures of power in New Orleans, including how wealth, influence, and social networks operated across racial and class lines. Marie's influence among white elites was often rooted in her reputation for spiritual insight and moral authority. Many believed that she could predict outcomes, resolve conflicts, and offer protection through her rituals and voodoo practices. This perception of her abilities allowed her to gain a unique position of authority that few African American women could attain at the time. White clients and associates would consult her on matters ranging from business decisions to personal relationships, often relying on her counsel to guide actions that could have significant consequence. By maintaining a combination of mystery, credibility, and tangible results, Marie ensured that her advice was respected and that her position remained secure in a society that was otherwise hostile to Black leadership. Marie also used her relationships with white elites strategically to protect and support her own community. She leveraged her connections to negotiate outcomes in legal disputes, prevent punishments, and secure resources that benefited marginalized populations. Her understanding of influence allowed her to act as an intermediary between communities and authorities, using her access to powerful figures to advocate for justice and safety. This required exceptional judgment, discretion, and foresight, as any misstep could have endangered both her own position and the welfare of those she represented. Through these actions, Marie transformed her social connections into a mechanism for empowerment, extending the impact of her leadership beyond the immediate confines of her community. Her influence within white society was also reinforced by her ability to adapt her persona and practices to appeal to diverse audiences. Marie understood that her clients often approached her with different expectations and cultural frameworks, and she tailored her advice, rituals, and guidance to resonate with. This adaptability demonstrated not only her intelligence but also her ability to bridge cultural and social divides, creating relationships that were mutually beneficial and sustainable. While she maintained her authority and autonomy, she also cultivated trust and respect by demonstrating practical wisdom, reliability, and consistency in her interactions. Marie's engagement with wealthy and influential figures also amplified her broader reputation and social word of her abilities, and her access to elite networks spread throughout New Orleans, attracting additional clients and followers, both Black and white. This amplification further enhanced her capacity to protect her community, influence social outcomes, and assert authority in areas that would otherwise have been inaccessible to a Black woman in the antebellum South. Her ability to operate simultaneously within multiple social spheres highlighted her exceptional skill in negotiation, persuasion, and leadership, solidifying her status as a central figure in the city's cultural and social life. The respect she commanded from white elites was also tied to her perceived moral authority. While voodoo was often misunderstood and stigmatized, Marie presented herself as a disciplined, knowledgeable, and principled practitioner. She demonstrated integrity in her interactions, balancing the spiritual and practical needs of her clients with a careful awareness of social norms and expectations. This combination of expertise and ethical conduct made her a trusted advisor and allowed her to exert influence that went beyond simple superstition or fear, establishing her as a credible and powerful figure in a society that typically excluded Black women from positions of authority. Marie's ability to engage with white society also had a protective dimension. By maintaining these relationships, she created a buffer against potential threats, including legal persecution, social ostracism, or direct violence. White elites who respected or feared her influence could act as indirect guarantors of her safety, discouraging aggression or interference from authorities or rival factions. The strategic use of social capital allowed Marie to operate with a degree of autonomy that would have been unattainable otherwise, providing her with the space to continue her work as a healer, spiritual guide, and advocate for marginalized communities. Her interactions with politicians and wealthy individuals, also positioned her as a mediator between different social worlds. She could interpret the intentions and motivations of those in power, anticipate potential conflicts, and craft interventions that balanced competing interests. This role required not only spiritual insight but also a sophisticated understanding of social dynamics, negotiation and strategy. By bridging these worlds, Marie ensured that her influence extended beyond her immediate followers, shaping broader social outcomes, and protecting the interests of those who depended on her guidance. Marie's engagement with white society did not diminish her commitment to her community, rather it enhanced her capacity to serve them. She demonstrated that influence could be exercised strategically, using relationships with powerful figures to secure tangible benefits for the vulnerable. Her ability to navigate complex social hierarchies, command respect and maintain her principles exemplified her intelligence, courage and leadership, highlighting the extraordinary dimensions of her life and work. By cultivating these connections and leveraging her spiritual authority, Marie Laveau solidified a position of unprecedented influence for a Black woman in antebellum New Orleans. Her ability to operate effectively across racial, social, and economic boundaries showcased her exceptional strategic thinking and reinforced her legacy as a figure of extraordinary power, intelligence, and resilience. Her life illustrated that authority could be exercised not only through direct action but also through subtle negotiation, relationship building and the strategic use of perception and reputation. Marie's interactions with white society also contributed to the enduring mythology surrounding her life. Stories of her influence over powerful figures, her ability to command respect and her mastery of spiritual practices captured the imagination of the city and beyond. These narratives reinforced her status as a figure of both social and mystical power, intertwining fact and legend to create a legacy that has persisted for generations. Her ability to command attention, respect, and loyalty across societal boundaries ensured that her impact was both immediate and enduring, shaping the cultural and social history of New Orleans in profound ways. Through her engagement with politicians, wealthy elites, and influential figures, Marie Laveau demonstrated that leadership could transcend traditional barriers of race, class, and gender. She leveraged her spiritual authority, intelligence, and social skills to create opportunities for protection, advocacy, and empowerment, ensuring that her influence extended far beyond her immediate community. Her life provides a compelling example of how marginalized individuals can exercise power strategically, using knowledge, charisma, and foresight to navigate complex social landscapes and effect meaningful change. Marie's ability to integrate spiritual mastery with social strategy solidified her place as one of the most extraordinary figures of her time, illustrating the interconnectedness of power, influence, and community protection. Her work in white society was a critical dimension of her overall impact, allowing her to safeguard her community, extend her influence.
Marie Laveau's involvement in social activism, including advocating for justice and helping families separated by slavery, was a critical component of her life and legacy. While she is often remembered primarily for her spiritual authority and mastery of voodoo, her actions extended far beyond ritual and healing. She actively engaged in efforts that sought to protect, empower, and abet her community in a society structured to deny them basic human rights. In an era when African Americans, particularly women, were systematically disenfranchised and marginalized, Marie's work represented both resistance and leadership, combining practical intervention, moral advocacy, and spiritual guidance to create tangible outcomes for those whose voices were most often ignored or silenced. The system of slavery imposed profound disruptions on family life. Enslaved families were routinely separated, with children sold away from parents, spouses denied their partners, and households subject to the whims of enslavers. This constant threat of separation created deep social and emotional vulnerability within enslaved communities. Marie Laveau understood the importance of family as a unit of resilience, identity, and support, and she used her position to intervene whenever possible. Whether through spiritual counseling, strategic mediation, or direct intervention with influential figures, she worked to mitigate the damage inflicted by systemic oppression. Her interventions often involved navigating complex social and legal systems, using her knowledge, charisma, and connections to protect families and restore a sense of security in an environment where such protections were rare. Marie's activism extended into legal and social advocacy, where she leveraged her influence and reputation to affect outcomes that impacted her community. She became a trusted mediator in disputes, a source of counsel for those facing injustice, and an intermediary between marginalized populations and authorities or powerful individuals. Her reputation as a healer and spiritual leader gave her credibility that transcended racial and class boundaries, allowing her to intercede in matters where others might have been powerless. By combining practical knowledge, spiritual insight, and social intelligence, she was able to navigate systems designed to oppress her community and achieve results that promoted justice, safety, and well-being. Her spiritual authority also played a significant role in her activism. Voodoo was not merely a religion or set of rituals, it functioned as a framework through which individuals could find guidance, protection, and empowerment. Marie used this authority to advocate for the vulnerable, offering rituals and ceremonies that reinforced psychological resilience and community solidarity. Her ability to integrate spiritual practice with social action provided a powerful tool for resistance, allowing enslaved and marginalized individuals to maintain a sense of agency and dignity, even in the face of systemic oppression. In this way, her spiritual leadership was inseparable from her activism, each aspect enhancing the other. Marie's efforts often focused on the protection and empowerment of women, who faced compounded vulnerabilities due to both race and gender. Women were frequently subjected to physical and sexual exploitation, denied legal recourse, and burdened with the care of children in oppressive conditions. Marie provided guidance, advocacy, and practical support to help women navigate these challenges. She mentored younger women, shared her knowledge of healing and spiritual practices, and offered interventions in situations of abuse or injustice. By creating networks of support and mentorship, she fostered resilience and solidarity among women, reinforcing the broader social fabric of the community and ensuring that her activism had lasting, intergenerational effect. Her work in advocating for justice also extended to broader communal issues. Marie Laveau used her influence to address conflicts within the community, negotiate with authorities, and intervene in situations that threatened the well-being of her followers. She understood that justice was not merely a matter of formal legal systems, which were often inaccessible or biased, but also a function of social networks, influence, and moral authority. By strategically positioning herself as a trusted mediator and advocate, she created avenues through which marginalized individuals could seek redress, protection, and guidance, thereby expanding the reach and impact of her activism. Marie's interventions were characterized by a deep understanding of human behavior, social dynamics, and the power of perception. She recognized that effective advocacy required not only action but also credibility and trust. She cultivated relationships with influential figures, including politicians, white elites, and local authorities, enabling her to leverage their power for the benefit of her community. Her capacity to operate across social boundaries, balancing authority, discretion, and strategic engagement, was a defining feature of her activism. She demonstrated that marginalized individuals could exercise influence, even in environments designed to suppress them, using intelligence, foresight, and relational skill to achieve meaningful outcomes. In addition to direct interventions, Marie's activism had a symbolic dimension. Her presence, reputation, and actions communicated a message of empowerment, resilience, and agency. By asserting her authority and acting on behalf of those who were powerless, she challenged societal norms that sought to dehumanize African Americans and women. Her example inspired others in her community to resist oppression, maintain cultural identity, and engage in acts of mutual support and solidarity. In this way, her activism was both practical and aspirational, providing immediate benefits while also shaping the collective consciousness of her community. Marie's advocacy also intersected with health and healing, areas in which she had extensive expertise. She recognized that access to healthcare, remedies, and knowledge about well-being was unevenly distributed, with marginalized communities often left vulnerable. Through her practice of herbal medicine and spiritual guidance, she addressed both physical and emotional suffering, often complementing her legal and social interventions with practical care. This holistic approach underscored the interconnected nature of her activism, which sought to protect, empower, and heal the community in ways that were simultaneously material, spiritual, and social. Her activism was further reinforced by her mentorship and teaching. By training others in spiritual practices, healing, and leadership, Marie created a legacy that extended beyond her own action. Her students and followers were equipped to continue her work, expanding the reach of her influence and ensuring that the principles of protection, justice, and empowerment would persist. This emphasis on education and continuity reflected her understanding of systemic oppression and her commitment to fostering resilience within the community. Marie Laveau's life illustrates that social activism in the context of slavery and racial oppression required both ingenuity and courage. She combined spiritual authority, social intelligence, and moral vision to create interventions that had tangible effects on the lives of marginalized individuals. Her advocacy for justice and her efforts to reunite and protect families separated by slavery highlight the practical and ethical dimensions of her leadership. By integrating spiritual practice, social engagement, and strategic intervention, she demonstrated that leadership could be exercised in ways that were empowering, protective, and
and transformative. Her work also contributed to the preservation and strengthening of cultural identity. In advocating for justice and supporting families, she reinforced traditions, community cohesion, and a sense of shared history and value. These efforts ensured that her activism was not only about immediate protection but also about sustaining the social and cultural vitality of her community over time. By addressing the needs of the vulnerable and advocating for fairness, she created a model of leadership that combined compassion, strategy, and moral authority, illustrating the multidimensional nature of her influence. Marie Laveau's engagement in social activism, particularly her advocacy for justice and the protection of families, exemplifies the integration of spiritual, social, and moral leadership. She demonstrated that meaningful change could be achieved through a combination of knowledge, influence, and action, even within the constraints of an oppressive society. Her life reflects the profound impact that a committed, intelligent, and strategic leader can have on marginalized communities, shaping both immediate outcomes and the broader trajectory of social resilience and empowerment. Through her activism, Marie Laveau established a legacy that resonated far beyond her immediate environment, influencing generations to come and leaving an indelible mark on the history of New Orleans, African American leadership, and the broader struggle for justice and human dignity. Marie Laveau's legacy as a cultural icon and spiritual leader has endured far beyond her lifetime, reflecting the extraordinary influence she wielded in life and the deep imprint she left on the collective memory of New Orleans and beyond. Her persona, achievements, and mystique created a narrative that combined spiritual mastery, social intelligence, and community leadership, shaping the way she was remembered both within African American communities and in the wider cultural imagination. The enduring nature of her legacy is tied not only to her practical skills as a healer and spiritual guide, but also to the symbolic resonance of her life as a woman who transcended the limitations imposed by race, gender, and social hierarchy in antebellum America. One of the most prominent aspects of Marie Laveau's legacy is her embodiment of cultural continuity and preservation. She was a key figure in maintaining African spiritual traditions in the Americas, blending them with elements of Catholicism, Native American beliefs, and local folk practices to create the distinctive form of Louisiana voodoo that is still recognized today. Her rituals, ceremonies, and teachings ensured that these practices were not lost, providing a sense of identity, cohesion, and resilience for African-descended communities in New Orleans. Through her life, voodoo evolved from a marginalized and often stigmatized set of practices into a respected and influential spiritual framework, capable of uniting people, offering guidance, and asserting cultural pride. Marie's legacy is also deeply intertwined with her role as a protector and advocate for marginalized populations. Her interventions on behalf of enslaved people, women, and other vulnerable groups demonstrated a commitment to justice, empowerment, and communal welfare. She provided practical assistance, spiritual guidance, and social support in ways that strengthened the fabric of her community and created a model of leadership rooted in service and responsibility. The stories of her acts of protection and advocacy contributed to the mythos surrounding her life, portraying her not only as a mystical figure, but also as a champion for those denied agency in a deeply oppressive society. These narratives reinforced her moral authority and underscored the enduring significance of her contributions. Another dimension of her legacy is her unparalleled influence across social and racial boundaries. In addition to commanding respect within Black communities, Marie engaged with white elites, politicians, and influential figures, leveraging her spiritual authority and social intelligence to secure protection and resources for her followers. This ability to operate across societal divides highlighted her exceptional strategic acumen and demonstrated that leadership could be exercised in ways that were subtle, effective, and transformative. Her interactions with powerful individuals further amplified her reputation, ensuring that her influence extended beyond the immediate circles of her community and into the broader social consciousness of New Orleans. Marie Laveau's persona also became a source of fascination and legend, contributing to the enduring cultural narrative that surrounds her. Accounts of her spiritual powers, her command of voodoo rituals, and her reputed ability to influence events captivated both contemporaries and subsequent generations. Oral traditions, folklore, and later written accounts embellished her achievements, blending fact and myth to create a larger-than-life figure whose story continues to captivate historians, writers, and the general public. This mythologization reflects the enduring impact of her life, illustrating how individual agency, intelligence, and charisma can resonate across time, inspiring fascination and admiration long after one's death. Her legacy as a woman of extraordinary skill and authority also challenged prevailing norms and expectations of gender. In a patriarchal society that constrained the roles of women, particularly Black women, Marie demonstrated that influence and leadership could be exercised through expertise. She occupied roles as healer, spiritual leader, mediator and community advocate, demonstrating that female authority could be both effective and respected. By embodying these roles, she created a model for future generations, showing that women could assert agency, protect their communities, and wield power in multifaceted ways, even under oppressive conditions. Marie's work also influenced the evolution of spiritual and healing practices in New Orleans. Her mastery of herbal medicine, ritual and spiritual guidance, set a standard for subsequent generations of practitioners, establishing methods, symbols and approaches that continue to inform contemporary voodoo and related traditions. She created a framework that integrated practical healing with spiritual insight, providing a holistic model that addressed both physical and psychological needs. This approach emphasized the interconnectedness of well-being, community cohesion, and spiritual practice, ensuring that her influence remained relevant in both historical and modern contexts. The cultural impact of Marie Laveau extends beyond spiritual practice to the broader identity and heritage of New Orleans. Her life and work became emblematic of the city's unique fusion of cultures, reflecting its African, Creole, French, and Caribbean influences. She symbolized the resilience, creativity, and adaptability of marginalized communities, illustrating how cultural practices could be preserved, adapted, and celebrated even under oppressive circumstances. Her story continues to shape tourism, literature, art, and popular culture, reinforcing her status as an enduring figure in both local and national consciousness. Marie's legacy is further amplified by her role as a mentor and teacher. She trained others in the practices of voodoo, healing, and leadership, ensuring the continuity of her methods and philosophy. Through her disciples and followers, her teachings persisted, influencing generations long after her death. This mentorship reinforced her impact, creating networks of knowledge and practice that preserved both the spiritual and social dimensions of her work. Her ability to transmit skills, values, and authority highlights the deliberate and strategic nature of her influence, ensuring that her legacy was institutionalized within the community rather than being solely personal or ephemeral. The mythos surrounding Marie Laveau also contributed to the broader perception of African American spiritual leadership. She became a symbol of the power, intelligence, and resilience of Black women, challenging stereotypes and societal limitations. Her life illustrates how cultural, spiritual, and social authority can intersect, providing a model of leadership that is both empowering and transformative. By embodying these qualities, she inspired subsequent generations to assert agency, embrace cultural heritage, and engage in social and spiritual leadership in ways that resonate with the principles she embodied. Marie's enduring cultural significance is also tied to the narratives of resistance and empowerment that her life represents. Through her spiritual practices, advocacy, and protection of marginalized individuals, she created pathways of resilience and autonomy in a society designed to deny such opportunity. Her life exemplifies how strategic use of knowledge, skill, and social networks can create meaningful impact, even under conditions of systemic oppression. The stories and legends that grew around her serve as both inspiration and instruction, demonstrating the possibilities of leadership, influence, and empowerment within constrained social frameworks. Her legacy continues to inspire scholarly research, popular media, and cultural productions, highlighting the multidimensional nature of her influence. Historians, anthropologists, and cultural commentators study her life not only to understand the history of New Orleans and Louisiana voodoo, but also to explore broader themes of power, gender, race, and resilience. She remains a subject of fascination in literature, film, and tourism, illustrating how her persona transcends temporal boundaries to influence contemporary understanding of cultural and spiritual heritage. Ultimately, Marie Laveau's legacy is a testament to her extraordinary life as a healer, spiritual leader, protector, and she demonstrated that influence could be exercised through knowledge, empathy, charisma, and strategic engagement, creating lasting impact on her community, culture, and society at large. Her life embodies the potential for leadership to transcend social, racial, and gendered barriers, illustrating how one individual's intelligence, courage, and vision can resonate across generations and become an enduring cultural and historical touchstone. Marie Laveau's story continues to shape the cultural identity of New Orleans and the broader understanding of African American spiritual leadership, demonstrating that the combination of spiritual mastery, social intelligence, and moral authority can create a legacy that endures far beyond the constraints of time and circumstance. Her life remains a powerful example of resilience, agency, and the transformative potential of leadership, rooted in knowledge, community, and vision. Marie Laveau's enduring influence on New Orleans culture and American spirituality cannot be overstated, as her life and work created a framework that continues to shape perceptions of voodoo, African American spiritual practices, and community leaders. Her persona, teachings and practices not only addressed the immediate needs of her contemporaries but also established a cultural and spiritual legacy that persists centuries later. This legacy is rooted in her ability to synthesize diverse traditions, navigate complex social dynamics, and exercise authority in ways that empowered marginalized populations while engaging broader society. Her influence extended across spiritual, social, and cultural dimensions, intertwining practical healing, ritual expertise, and leadership into a model of enduring relevance. One of the central aspects of Marie Laveau's impact was her role in codifying and popularizing Louisiana voodoo as a cohesive spiritual system. By integrating African, Catholic, and indigenous elements, she created rituals, ceremonies, and symbols that were accessible, meaningful, and spiritually potent for her followers. Her leadership transformed what had been localized and sometimes secretive practices into a structured and recognizable spiritual framework. This allowed voodoo to gain broader acceptance within her community and positioned it as a source of cultural identity, resilience, and empowerment. Through her teaching, mentorship, and public presence, she ensured that these practices would persist, shaping the spiritual landscape of New Orleans for generations to come. Marie's influence also extended to the ways in which spiritual authority could be exercised in a society structured by racial and gender hierarchies. As a Black woman in the antebellum South, she navigated a world where formal authority was largely inaccessible, yet she wielded remarkable power within her community and beyond, demonstrating that spiritual expertise, social intelligence, and moral authority could create forms of leadership that transcended conventional limitation. Her capacity to command respect from both Black and white populations, to mediate conflicts, and to protect vulnerable individuals, illustrates the multidimensional nature of her authority. This dynamic challenged prevailing norms and provided a model of female leadership and empowerment that resonated within her community and has continued to inspire subsequent generations.
Another dimension of her influence was her role as a healer and provider of practical support. Marie combined herbal medicine, spiritual rituals, and psychological guidance to address the holistic needs of those who sought her help. Enslaved individuals, free people of color, and even white clients relied on her remedies, interventions, and counsel for both physical and emotional challenges. By attending to the interconnected aspects of well-being, body, mind, and spirit, she demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of human health and resilience. This approach reinforced her authority as people recognized her effectiveness in creating tangible outcomes that improved lives, strengthened communities, and maintained social cohesion. Marie's work also had a profound social dimension. She provided mentorship, guidance, and protection to marginalized populations, including women, families, and enslaved individuals. Her ability to mediate disputes, advocate for justice, and protect those at risk reflected a deep understanding of the social dynamics of New Orleans and the vulnerabilities imposed by systemic oppression. By combining practical intervention with spiritual guidance, she created a network of support that strengthened the resilience of her community. This combination of social, spiritual, and protective leadership positioned her as an indispensable figure, whose influence extended far beyond individual interactions, shaping broader social structures and cultural norms. Her engagement with white society further amplified her impact. Marie cultivated relationships with wealthy elites, politicians, and influential figures, using these connections strategically to protect her followers, secure resources, and mediate disputes. Her ability to operate across racial and social boundaries reflected not only charisma but also strategic intelligence and force. By leveraging her reputation and spiritual authority, she created a bridge between marginalized communities and the centers of power, ensuring that her influence could protect and benefit those who would otherwise be powerless. This dimension of her leadership illustrates how spiritual and social authority can intersect to create practical outcomes, demonstrating the interplay between perception, influence, and action. Marie Laveau's persona and legacy were also shaped by the myths and stories that grew around her life. Accounts of her mystical abilities, her control over spirits, and her influence over human affairs were disseminated through oral tradition, popular culture, and later written work. While some stories were exaggerated or romanticized, they contributed to her enduring status as an iconic figure, whose life bridged the worlds of the mystical and the. These narratives reinforced her authority, inspired respect, and preserved her legacy in ways that extended far beyond her lifetime. The blending of fact and legend in her story has ensured that Marie Laveau remains a central figure in discussions of spirituality, culture, and African American history. Her mentorship and transmission of knowledge were critical to the sustainability of her influence.
By training others in spiritual practices, rituals and leadership, Marie ensured that her methods and philosophies would endure across generations. This dissemination of knowledge created a lineage of practitioners and leaders who maintained the integrity of Louisiana voodoo, reinforced communal bonds and preserved cultural tradition. Her emphasis on teaching and empowerment illustrates that her legacy was not only personal but institutional, embedding her influence within the ongoing social and spiritual fabric of New Orleans. Marie's cultural impact extended to her ability to inspire identity, pride and resilience. Through her leadership, she reinforced the value of African-descended cultural practices and spiritual traditions at a time when assimilation and oppression threatened their continuity. Her life demonstrated that marginalized communities could assert agency, protect themselves, and maintain cultural integrity despite systemic attempts to suppress their identity. In this sense, her legacy encompasses both the tangible outcomes of her actions and the symbolic power of her example, which has inspired cultural pride, scholarship, and artistic expression for centuries. In addition to her spiritual and social influence, Marie Laveau contributed to the formation of New Orleans as a cultural and spiritual hub. Her presence and practices attracted followers, visitors and curiosity from across social and geographic boundaries, reinforcing the city's reputation as a center of mysticism, cultural fusion, and spiritual innovation. The integration of African, Catholic and indigenous elements in her practices reflected the broader cultural synthesis of New Orleans itself, making her a key figure in shaping the city's identity. Her life and work contributed to the visibility and legitimacy of African American spiritual traditions within this broader cultural context. Marie's legacy also highlights the role of strategic intelligence in social negotiation and leadership. Her ability to influence outcomes, protect vulnerable populations, and navigate complex social hierarchies demonstrates that leadership, in marginalized contexts, requires adaptability, foresight, and relational skill. She modeled a form of power that was exercised through knowledge, persuasion and moral authority rather than formal position, illustrating that influence can be both subtle and profound. This aspect of her legacy continues to inform understandings of leadership, particularly within contexts where conventional authority is limited or denied. Her enduring reputation as the Voodoo Queen exemplifies the intersection of spirituality, culture and social. Marie Laveau became a symbol of resilience, wisdom, and agency, demonstrating that individuals can shape their communities, assert moral and social authority, and create lasting cultural impact even in the face of systemic oppression. Her life provides a template for understanding how spiritual, social and cultural leadership can intersect, offering lessons in empowerment, strategy, and moral responsibility that remain relevant today. Through her synthesis of spiritual mastery, social intelligence, and community advocacy, Marie Laveau left an indelible mark on New Orleans, African American cultural history, and the broader American imagination. Her legacy continues to resonate because it encompasses practical impact, symbolic authority, and cultural preservation, illustrating how one individual's life can shape the spiritual, social and cultural landscape of an entire city and community. Marie Laveau's story demonstrates that leadership, influence and cultural preservation are interconnected, and that the actions of a single individual, grounded in knowledge, compassion and strategic engagement, can reverberate across generations, shaping both the material and symbolic dimensions of a community's life. Her enduring presence in folklore, history and culture underscores the lasting significance of her life's work, highlighting the ways in which spiritual,
Marie Laveau's ability to blend spiritual practice, community leadership, and social influence into a single cohesive force was a defining feature of her life, securing her place as one of the most remarkable figures in American history. Her multifaceted role encompassed being a voodoo priestess, healer, protector, mentor, and advocate, all of which combined to create a legacy that extended far beyond her immediate community. She operated within the constraints of 19th-century New Orleans, a society deeply divided by race, class, and gender, yet she was able to assert authority, inspire devotion, and create tangible outcomes for those who depended on her guidance. Her unique capacity to integrate spiritual mastery with social strategy and moral leadership allowed her influence to permeate multiple layers of society, ensuring that her impact would endure long after her death. Marie Laveau's spiritual practice was at the heart of her influence, providing both a framework for understanding the world and a source of tangible support for her followers. Louisiana Voodoo, as she practiced and taught it, combined African spiritual traditions, Catholic rituals, and local folk practices into a cohesive system that addressed both the practical and metaphysical needs of her community. Through her rituals, ceremonies, and teachings, she offered guidance, protection, and empowerment to individuals navigating the uncertainties of daily life under slavery, segregation, and systemic oppression. Her spiritual authority was not merely symbolic, it was deeply practical, providing psychological, emotional, and even physical relief to those who sought her counsel. By creating a trusted spiritual framework, she reinforced communal bonds and instilled a sense of agency and resilience among her followers. Equally important was Marie's role as a protector and advocate. She used her spiritual authority and social intelligence to safeguard vulnerable populations, particularly enslaved people and women, from the harshest impacts of oppression. She intervened in situations of abuse, mediated disputes, and leveraged her influence with powerful figures to secure favorable outcomes for those at risk. These actions went beyond the typical functions of a spiritual leader. They demonstrated her deep commitment to social justice and the welfare of her community. By positioning herself as both a spiritual and social guardian, she created a network of support that empowered individuals and strengthened collective resilience. Marie's influence extended across racial and social boundaries, a feat that was extraordinary in the context of antebellum New Orleans. She cultivated relationships with wealthy elites, politicians, and other influential figures, using these connections strategically to protect her community and amplify her authority. Her engagement with white society required exceptional discretion, intelligence, and interpersonal skill, allowing her to negotiate power dynamics while maintaining her autonomy and the trust of her followers. These interactions provided both practical benefits, such as protection and resources, and symbolic significance, demonstrating that a Black woman could command respect and exert influence in multiple social spheres. Her mentorship and teaching were also central to her enduring impact. Marie trained apprentices and followers in the rituals, healing practices, and leadership skills that underpinned her spiritual and social authority. By passing on her knowledge, she ensured that her methods, philosophy, and influence would continue beyond her lifetime. This emphasis on continuity and education reinforced the resilience of her community and preserved the cultural and spiritual traditions she championed. Her role as a mentor also created networks of leadership that extended her reach and cemented her status as a foundational figure in Louisiana voodoo and African American cultural history. Marie's reputation was further enhanced by the myths, stories, and folklore that surrounded her life. Accounts of her mystical powers, her ability to influence events, and her command over spirits captured the imagination of contemporaries and subsequent generations. While some of these stories were likely embellished, they contributed to the aura of authority and reverence that defined her legacy. This blending of fact and legend helped her transcend the limitations of her era, making her an enduring cultural icon whose influence continues to be felt in literature, film, tourism, and popular culture. Her mythos reinforced her authority and highlighted the ways in which individual agency and reputation can shape collective memory. Marie's work also emphasized the importance of cultural preservation. By maintaining African-derived spiritual practices and integrating them with local and Catholic traditions, she ensured that cultural knowledge, rituals, and identity were transmitted across generations. This preservation of cultural heritage was especially significant in a context where African-descended traditions were often suppressed, stigmatized, or misrepresented. Through her practices and teachings, Marie safeguarded a sense of identity, continuity, and pride within her community, establishing a model for the preservation and adaptation of cultural traditions under conditions of oppression. Her ability to combine spirituality with social action also illustrates the multidimensional nature of her leadership. Marie did not separate ritual and ceremony from practical intervention. Instead, she created a holistic approach that addressed the spiritual, social, and material needs of her followers. Whether through healing, guidance, advocacy, or protection, her actions reinforced one another, creating a comprehensive system of influence and support. This approach exemplifies the integration of knowledge, empathy, and strategy, demonstrating how leadership can simultaneously inspire, protect, and empower. Marie's influence extended into the broader cultural imagination of New Orleans. Her presence and work helped shape the city's identity as a center of spiritual innovation, cultural synthesis, and resilience. Louisiana voodoo, as popularized and codified by Marie, became emblematic of the city's unique blending of African Creole and European tradition. She attracted followers and observers from various social strata, creating a focal point for cultural exchange, spiritual exploration, and community cohesion. Her impact on the cultural landscape of New Orleans illustrates how individual leadership can shape collective identity and leave a lasting imprint on the social and spiritual fabric of a city. Another critical aspect of Marie Laveau's legacy is her role as a symbol of resilience, intelligence, and empowerment. In a society that sought to marginalize and disenfranchise Black women, she asserted agency,
commanded respect and created meaningful change. Her life demonstrates that authority can be exercised through knowledge, skill, and moral courage, and that influence is not confined to formal positions of power. By navigating social, spiritual, and cultural hierarchies with intelligence and strategic acumen, she created opportunities for empowerment, advocacy, and leadership, both for herself and for those who relied on her guidance. Her enduring significance is also tied to her ability to inspire future generations. Marie's life and work provide a model of leadership that integrates spiritual mastery, social responsibility, and cultural preservation. Scholars, practitioners, and admirers continue to study and celebrate her achievements, drawing lessons about resilience, strategy, and empowerment from her example. Her story encourages reflection on the ways in which marginalized individuals can assert agency, create influence, and leave lasting cultural and social legacies despite systemic obstacles. Marie Laveau's combination of spiritual authority, social intelligence, and moral leadership created a legacy that encompasses practical, symbolic, and cultural dimension. She transformed voodoo from a marginalized practice into a respected spiritual system, provided protection and advocacy for vulnerable communities, and navigated social hierarchies to amplify her influence. Her mentorship ensured continuity of knowledge and practice, while the myths and stories that grew around her life solidified her status as a cultural icon. Through her integrated approach to leadership, spirituality, and community engagement, Marie Laveau established herself as one of the most influential figures in the history of New Orleans and African American culture. Her ability to blend practical intervention with spiritual guidance, protect marginalized populations, and maintain authority across diverse social spheres, illustrates the multidimensional nature of her impact. She left a legacy that continues to shape perceptions of Louisiana voodoo, African American spiritual leadership, and the possibilities of resilience and empowerment in the face of systemic oppression. Marie's life and work exemplify the potential for individuals to create enduring influence through intelligence, courage, and strategic engagement. Her capacity to combine spiritual mastery, community advocacy, cultural preservation, and social negotiation ensured that her legacy would resonate long after her passing, establishing her as a figure whose significance transcends time, geography, and cultural boundary. Marie Laveau's life stands as a testament to the extraordinary power of resilience, intelligence, and vision. She was more than a voodoo priestess. She was a protector, advocate, healer, and leader whose influence reshaped her community and left an indelible mark on history. In a world designed to limit her because of her race and gender, she transcended boundaries, created networks of empowerment, and safeguarded the dignity and lives of those who had no other protector. Her legacy endures not only in the continued practice of Louisiana voodoo, but also in the stories, myths, and cultural memory that celebrate her wisdom, courage, and authority. Marie Laveau's story challenges us to rethink the forms of power, leadership, and resistance. She demonstrates that influence is not only found in titles or formal positions but in knowledge, moral authority, empathy, and the ability to navigate complex social landscapes. Her life illustrates that one individual can create ripples of change that extend across generations, inspiring resilience, cultural pride, and community solidarity. Ultimately, Marie Laveau remains an icon of empowerment, a symbol that strength, wisdom, and courage can flourish even under the harshest conditions. Her life reminds us that legacy is not measured merely by wealth or fame, but by the lives touched, the communities strengthened, and the cultural heritage preserved. Through her actions, teachings, and enduring legend, Marie Laveau continues to inspire, guide, and challenge us to recognize the extraordinary potential within those